Hi. 25 years after its release, I finally got around to playing the first part of the iconic Half-Life. And suddenly Half-Life became a new universe for me, which really interested me. Before, I heard a lot about that first, original Half-Life is a cult game. And it has a lot of fans. But I never understood why. It is clear that at the time of its release it set the new level for the game industry in general. But it turned out to be much more confusing and complicated than it seems at first glance. The game was held on the stream. During passing, I had some questions, which I decided to clarify and search for information on the internet. How much I was surprised by the fact that the game is not even that. The first Half-Life should be seen as part of the universe of the world of Half-Life, not as a separate game. And that is how the game is perceived more as a whole. Many of the events that took place in the universe become clearer. And if you know where to look, the world is full of lore, events, and mysteries that players are still figuring out. If you look at the first Half-Life as a standalone game in 2023, then it looks very mediocre. But, and here it's worth clarifying, I played the original game from Steam, on the old engine. In the same Steam there is Half-Life on the Source engine, and Half-Life, Black Mesa. And this is a remake of the first part, with new graphics. In Black Mesa they also redesigned and updated many locations and many other gaming moments. There is another important point, which is worth to clear up. I have never been a fan of the Half-Life universe, and a lot of things can be either misunderstood or wrongly explained. And 100% I will forget to tell you a lot of things. That's why if you want to fully dive into the universe and unravel some conspiracy theories, then you should search on YouTube. Half-Life Iceberg. I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting stuff there. Personally, I was interested to see all parts of the video about the tip of the iceberg, and about how much of a mystery the entire series of games in the universe holds. After all, many of the storylines go through all parts of Half-Life and Portal. And from the looks of it, there will be a continuation in future games of the series. After not a big introduction, I want to share with you my thoughts that I had after passing the game. It's worth starting with the fact that last year, I started writing the top 100 things I want to do in life. Getting through Half-Life on stream was one of the items on that list. Yes, I realize that the game is 25 years old and not many people will watch it. But nevertheless, I decided to do it. After all, in the first place it's interesting to me. And since the game was not passed in childhood, now is the time to do it. And so it happened. I passed Half-Life on stream. After playing it, I had a question to myself. How do you play the original Half-Life in 2023? The game came out in 1998, released by Valve. And right after its release, it set a new bar for all future games in the FPS genre first-person shooter. We can say that Half-Life showed the future 0 years what the game developers should aspire to. The game had a big world, a lot of different weapons with various properties that were used in different situations. There is also a storyline, which still holds a lot of mysteries and leaves a lot of unexplained moments. There is a great hope that in the future parts of Half-Life many of the mysteries will be solved. For example, there is still no exact information about who the character GMan is. To be more precise, the character in the suit with a briefcase. After all, this character in the game, never called by name. And the name GMan appeared because of the name of the file with the character model. There are so many theories about the origin and the mission of GMan in the game. But after 25 years, we still don't have exact information who it is and what his goal is. There are dozens if not hundreds of YouTube videos and forum threads about the character. There is an opinion that in the game world, GMan is not even a person, but a representative of an alien civilization. The second question is what kind of alien civilization? After all, in the world of Half-Life there are several of them. There's a theory that GMan is annihilant. There is a second theory that GMan is a representative of the government. And his name is an abbreviation for Governman. Well, and one of the most popular theories is that GMan is Gordon Freeman, from the future. At the time of its release, Half-Life had very advanced graphics for the late 90s. There were various visual effects in the game, and a lot of new mechanics in the shooter that had not been used before. It turned out that a lot of mechanics were cut out due to the fact that the developers didn't have time to make everything in time. And a lot of ideas were discarded because they didn't quite fit into the game's lore. And that created a certain kind of wow effect. I mean, if you look at what games came out in the 90s, you realize that the graphics are very cool. And the technology and the mechanics are very cool for that time. Very importantly, the game is very well optimized. And on the PC at the time there were no lags and freezes. To date, the recommended system requirements, with a 133 MHz processor and 32 MB RAM, causes a smile. At that time, to achieve this optimization was very difficult, especially for a game of this scale. An interesting point is how the developers approached the idea of optimization during the game. There are prototypes of the character, more precisely the enemy, who, after a certain amount of playing time, appeared on the map and eat the corpses of dead enemies, thereby optimizing computer resources. Even, there is a model of the monster, which in the release version was cut out. After all, at that time, from a technical standpoint, to realize it was quite difficult. At the time of the release in 1998, I was a schoolboy. It was a time when we weren't downloading games from the internet, we were handing them to each other physically. So, it's 1998 outside. I remember a classmate having a game disc. We were passing this disc to each other every day so that as many guys as possible could install the game and play the new hit. Those were the distant and forgotten times, when games were on CDs and someone's HDD with 40 gigabits of storage was used as a file exchanger. More precisely, it was my HDD. And because I often went to friends with their HDD, and the drive came to me to one of the first. After all, I could pretty quickly distribute the game to anyone who wanted. A kind of torrent tracker from the 90s. So, the game is installed. And the first thing I see when I start it up, that my character named Gordon Freeman gets on the subway train and is going somewhere. At that moment, this approach seemed very strange to me. And by the feel of it, it was the ride that felt like an eternity. After all, you want to run faster through the game map, kill alien monsters, and save the planet. But here it doesn't. The character is in a confined space, can't shoot or walk normally, and all Gordon can do, he can only crouch down and jump up. Well, and walk 5 meters across the carriage, while listening to a lot of useful information about the Black Mesa lab. Good thing the trip didn't last forever, but only 5 minutes. And even when I arrived at the end point, they didn't give me a gun right away. They made me walk around the lab, talking to the scientists, and looking for a protective suit. And at some point, I realized that the game is not like other shooters. For the first 30 minutes of gameplay time, I never fired a shot. It was very strange. But gradually the plot of the game unfolded, and it strongly tightens the gameplay. After the failed experiment begins to happen some tinny, Gordon gradually collects various weapons. First, we get a crowbar, which we will use throughout the game. This particular crowbar will become one of the symbols of the universe. Then we have pistol, machine gun, grenades, rocket launchers. Gradually, in the pockets of the hero is the number of weapons that can arm a small army. Going through the story, the weapons open up new variations of the game. Some enemies can be passed in stealth mode, or just jump and dodge. I chose the option to kill everyone with a machine gun and rocket launcher. A trivial way, but it works. But then something happened that I did not expect. Locations and monsters in the game are placed and created in such a way as to scare the player. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't pass the game when it was released. When I was a high school student. The game is intensely scary. Today it's been 25 years since the game's release. And I finally got up the courage to play one of the most famous games, the gaming industry. And even now, while playing it, I got goosebumps quite often. From the creepiness that happens on the screen. I really like games in which the developers gradually step by step serves game history and weapons for the destruction of enemies. After going through the game on the streamer, I realized that the game, though, is very cool. But its time has passed. Which is not surprising, because there were a few more games in the universe. Such as Half-Life, Blue Shift, Opposing Force, Portal, Portal 2, and the continuation of Half-Life's storyline Half-Life 2, a few episodes, and Half-Life, Alyx. Separately, I want to mention the fact that the monsters, which are placed on the map in such a way as to scare the player, they stand right behind the wall, in a confined space. Today this is surprising, and the feeling that the designers did not consider common sense. After all, it's unlikely that an alien creature, or a crabhead will stand behind a wall, and wait very long just for the player. As if he had nothing else to do. Special Forces. This is a separate topic. He appears in very unexpected places, and also raises a lot of questions. It seems that the opponents have already defeated all. But no. You relax, and the SWAT team comes down on you in an elevator. And so all the time. Notice that there are places on maps where the opponents are placed very thoughtfully. And then there is the reverse situation. The next point, which is very upsetting. It seems that in the very beginning of the game, the developers are very anxious about what is happening, and thought very carefully about where to place, so that the player was interesting to play and learn the world. But from the middle, there's a persistent feeling that there wasn't enough time to develop. Opponents and key plot twists are in some chaotic places. And more than 20 times, during the passage of the game, I was in a situation where I could not figure out what to do next. In what direction to move. You know that this is where you have to press the button. But there is no button. Yeah, and in general, I don't know what to do next. And so you have to search the internet for information on how to proceed through the level. And there are no hints in the game itself. It is possible that I'm already used to the fact that modern games are played by hand. Initially thought that games used to be more difficult and less player-friendly. But the further I went, the more and more some of the decisions seemed absurd. Example. In a location you have to kill a helicopter, and then find a cannon that shoots through doors. I ran around the location for a very long time, and tried to find a way to solve. Given that the cannon is far away, and it is not obvious that it is even necessary to shoot from it. Or rather, it is obvious that it must be shot, but it is not clear where to shoot. Or another example. In one of the locations, there is a tank. Shortly before that moment, we are given a rocket launcher. And as if logical that the tank should shoot it from the rocket launcher. But no. It is necessary to kill the tank from the underbarrel grenade launcher and a machine gun. Moreover, it remains a mystery to me why one weapon kills the tank, and the other does not. Of course, I am not a military expert. But I think that the rocket launcher causes more destruction than the underbarrel grenade from the assault rifle. And this is despite the fact that the next very similar tank is killed just with a rocket launcher or a laser. In some places, when you kill another tank or a plane with the last rounds, I get the thought that if I run out of ammo, then even further, I will not be able to pass. Fortunately, on the normal level of difficulty, I have not had these situations. Although, by the end of the game, ammo still have to save. With a fairly large variety of weapons. I only used a few weapons, a pistol or revolver, an assault rifle, grenades, and a rocket launcher. And at the end an alien cannon that regenerates its own ammo. After all, in the Zen world, ammo doesn't fall off the special forces anymore. There are very few of them, although they do occur. There are very cool mechanics with mines that can be attached to walls or the floor. These mines can be detonated remotely. The mechanics are very cool and new for the time. Even today, similar weapon mechanics are rare. But the whole game can be passed without the use of such weapons. On this, every man for himself will be able to find both pluses and minuses in this. The idea is cool, implemented great. But it's not very convenient to use. I can assume that on maximum difficulty in this weapon will make sense. The original voice acting is very nice. But decided to pass with the cracker. And how much was my surprise that there are several voices. They are so awful that almost always completely distort what is happening on the screen, and put me in a stupor. The lack of emotion, I'm not even talking about, it's nothing compared to the rest. The nice thing is that these voices are there, and they greatly simplified the gameplay for players who don't know English, in which the game originally came out. As for me, the original Half-Life is really a cult game of its time. It tells a very interesting and unusual story about a young scientist who was saving his life after a bad experiment. Even after the game's playthrough, you will feel that not all the puzzles were solved. The characters are very memorable. And so far are the sources for memes, jokes, and various theories, and that's great. It means they turned out to be very charismatic, unique, and unusual. Can I recommend playing the original Half-Life today? More likely no than yes. The game is suitable for those who are interested in where the game industry started. In fact, this game brought a lot of new features to the gaming industry. It set a new level for the FPS genre. All I can recommend is to take a ride at the beginning of the game, on the train, go through a location with an experiment, and play some more. The main goal is to quench your sense of nostalgia for the game. It is the first locations that are very well thought out and interesting. They create a positive impression of the game. It is good that the studio released a remake of the game on the Source engine. And then their remake was called Half-Life: Black Mesa. I think Black Mesa solved a lot of the negative things I told you about before. In the last levels, there is a factory where they produce strong monsters. And in the original, this topic is not covered at all. You can see that the location is not finished. After all, we're at a dead end. Maybe not a dead end, but I never found what to do there next. But in Half-Life: Black Mesa remake, this theme is revealed much better than the original. The game is quite long, and considering the scale of the game, it becomes clear to me why many things look unfinished. I think if the developers had more time to develop, the game came out even more awesome. Even the way the game was originally seen by the players. It looks very cool and memorable. Of course, adjusted for the fact that the game is from 1998. After all, there's a reason it's being played, 25 years after its release. Thank you very much for watching, because for me, every view, every like and recommendation of this video, and other videos on the channel is very important. If the video will get 100 likes, we will play the second part of Half-Life on our streams. And at this point I'll say goodbye to you. See you on the streamers, and in the new videos.